Republicans have made it clear that they will not work bipartisanly or in good faith with Democrats, even on non-controversial issues, because it's an election year and anything they pass would be seen as a political victory for the president. So my point is, this is where I'm just really baffled by TYT, mostly represented by Anna, not to pick on her too much, which is she thinks that Republicans and Democrats are basically the same, even when one is in power and doing stupid things and nothing good with that power, the Republicans, and Democrats are not in power, at least in the House, and therefore are unable to do anything meaningful. So I think it's good that Democrats are actually playing tit for tat with Republicans in the House, given that they can't do anything else except basically stick it to them.
I almost wish that, not that I would live in this universe, but I wish I could peer into the universe where somehow Anna becomes president and like she has to navigate these situations herself, right? And it's not to say that it's like, oh, woe is me, like Biden can't do anything. I agree. Biden should do more on many various aspects of his governance, right? I agree with that. And I agree that if somebody like Anna or Cenk were in that position, they would do the more things that I would want them to do in many of the different circumstances. But the idea that you can just hard-nosed negotiate literally everything from a position of zero platform and power, in the case of being the minority in the House of Representatives, in a house where basically it is majority equals 100% control, it's just ridiculous, right? It's like when Cenk, I remember his genius plan to get Republicans to vote on a nominee during Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland. This was his genius plan. This is what he said years and years ago when Republicans were blocking the nomination of Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court. He said, well, I tell you what I would do if I was president. I would literally tell the Republicans, if you don't vote on Merrick Garland, I'm going to nominate Lawrence Lessig, an even more progressive, radical leftist, to be on the Supreme Court. And it's like, Cenk, you're multiplying by zero. Why would they give a fuck? They would just like, not only have you made yourself look more radical, they would be running campaign ads about how crazy the nominees you put up are.
Yeah.
When Merrick Garland was such an uncontroversial nominee, and then they would just tell you no anyway. Right?
Yeah,
like
right.
this is not a strategy that would yield any results. But for some reason they Cenk and Anna tend to, in my view, really overestimate the ability to harshly negotiate things. I mean, look at Trump. Trump harshly negotiated literally every single thing he wanted as president. How much legislative accomplishments did he get done? He got nothing done.
Right.
Nothing. What he did accomplish was radicalizing the Republican Party in the House, which maybe Anna and Cenk would say that's a good thing. Sure, maybe, right? But at the end of the day, if you care about getting progressive priorities done, it's not about just telling every single person, fuck you, do what I say, or I'm gonna tell the media that you look bad. Trump did that his entire 4 years. And it didn't seem to result in significant outcomes for Republican policy.
It's funny you say that, because this is something else. Like, so there's a duo out there who I really like. I watch their stream as much as I'm able to. It's very rare these days, but they're the Vanguard. Okay, Gavin and Zach from the Vanguard, and they're more progressive than I am, or they're more left than I am, and I consider myself pretty progressive. And they're pretty hard on Biden, particularly after Gaza. And again, understandable reasons. But like we had, we kind of had this back and forth over when they interviewed me over passing certain pieces of legislation, like codifying Roe protections. That's what it was. And they were like, listen, why didn't Biden codify Roe? And I'm like, well, they tried while they still had majorities in both chambers, and it passed the House, but it couldn't pass the Senate because you needed 60 votes to, make it past the filibuster. And Sinema and Manchin weren't willing to break the filibuster in order to pass it. And their point was, well, he should have made them. And it's like, here's my thing.
It's the dictator thing all over again.
Well, so it is and it isn't. So what's interesting is that's where the expression the bully pulpit comes from. There's the idea, and we've seen historic examples of where even other elected officials tend to be intimidated by the president of the United States. And it's understandable. In terms of concentration of power, the president is infinitely more powerful and important than any other single individual actor. Congressman ain't shit, right? But at the end of the day, they actually don't answer to the president. The president is not their boss. They are in a completely different branch of government. The president can't fire Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin really, even though there's a power disparity there, Joe Manchin can and has told Joe Biden to fuck off effectively, right? And there's really nothing that Biden can do about it in terms of firing. Now, you could say, well, he could sick Merrick Garland on Joe Manchin's daughter or Joe Manchin for like corrupt business practices, et cetera, and so forth. And in theory, that could be done, right? You'd have to get Merrick Garland to cooperate. Joe Biden would have to have the instinct to do that in the first place. I'm not saying that Democrats can't play the game more ruthlessly, but I think it's a reduction. I think it's very reductive and simplified to say, when Cenk or others say Joe Biden can just issue a command, a proclamation, and if he were worth his salt, all Democrats would just fall in line. I don't think that's how it works anymore, especially in today's age, where I feel like reverence for the presidency is not what it was when LBJ was president or when FDR was president. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, Cenk and Anna also, unfortunately, they have this general presumption that the reason the bully pulpit, the reason like the bullying of legislators would be such an effective strategy is because, Americans are actually super duper progressive, right? And the only thing that's missing is somebody to come out and just be progressive and be bold and be in favor of all these policies. The issue with that thinking is obviously that if you were to have line item referenda votes on every single progressive priority, marijuana legalization, to some degree, like liberalizing the criminalization of drugs more broadly, $15 minimum wage, abortion rights, whatever it is, right? You could probably get a majority of the vote in almost every state on almost every one of those issues. So naturally, that leads you to the assumption of, well, why don't people just overwhelmingly vote for progressive Democrats? It's because the character of people on single issue votes is not uniformly the same. People, like, it's a different group of people that majority vote for marijuana legalization, that a majority vote for abortion, that a majority vote for a $15 minimum wage. And when you put all of those policies into the same person, because now all these policies are diversified into a same person, there's a lot of people that say, I want a $15 minimum wage, but I don't want marijuana legalization.
Right.
I want, I want gay rights, but I don't want abortion rights. Now that sounds peculiar to most progressives, but again, 85% of Americans just simply do not think one-dimensionally like this. And at the end of the day, Cenk ran a presidential campaign. He ran a presidential campaign on what he said was, the most easily thing to get elected on. It was like paid parental leave, universal pre-K, and like background checks for guns. It was like all things that polled in like 70, 80, 90%. He got dominated in the Democratic primary. Now you could say, hey, to be fair, it's Cenk Uygur. He's running for president. People weren't even sure if he could legally run. What was his fundraising? He ran for Congress. And raised over $1 million, which anybody with $1 million should be able to run a competitive race for Congress. That's kind of your threshold, is like, if you can get $1 million, you can run a competitive race, especially in a primary for a congressional seat. He got 6% of the vote. 6%. Now you could always say, hey, to be fair, there was a national smear campaign that was run against Cenk Uygur. That's true as well. But at the end of the day, if you're running for president, guys, there's a smear campaign against Joe Biden. There's a smear campaign against Donald Trump. There's a smear campaign against AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. These guys were all successfully elected people. Okay, and so we can't always just presume it's all these systemic reasons as to why we lose. Sometimes people just aren't where you are in terms of policy. And that's the thing that I think Cenk and Anna, especially when they talk about this bully pulpit thing, they don't tend to realize, like, guys, America just isn't quite on the same page as you guys. And so given that you want to accomplish these policies and Americans don't necessarily want to accomplish these policies, you have to make compromises. You have 100%. To go for things that you can get past. Maybe you can't get single payer, but you can get a public option. These are just things that you might have to do in order to improve things, but not get necessarily everything you want.
No, 100%. I think you made a really good point there in terms of like distinguishing, because it is true. I mean, the polling is pretty reliable that progressive policy items are just overwhelmingly more popular than right-wing policy items. But to your point, that's taken in a vacuum, right? That is not a campaign. It's not a progressive campaign.
Yeah, well,
I'm talking about progressive policy items.
Yeah, a perfect example is like how like libertarians are obviously on our side when it comes to abortion, but they're not going to vote for someone who just passed the biggest infrastructure bill in like America's history, obviously. So, well, I don't know. Obviously, it depends on their calculus on like how exactly they determine those items and weight them. But they are not going to obviously going to vote for Democrats. And I would think, I don't have numbers on this, but I would guess that most libertarians vote for Republicans.
No, I think that again, great example, because I mean, growing up in rural Kentucky, I can tell you there are plenty of people out there who would love the decriminalization of marijuana, right? But but that's it. That's the only progressive policy that they will back, right? So yeah, I think it's a really.
I mean, how many Republicans do we know that say, "Oh, you know, I like the Democrats' economics, but they're pro-choice," and I'm never gonna.
No, yeah, 100%. Abortion is just a
Yeah, there's a shitload of people who are just like single issue. And I'm not saying that these people are right. Obviously, I have my ideological leanings. I disagree with them. But the reality is, if you're running for president, you have to get those types of people to vote for you. And obviously, look, I'm not saying you should run as a pro-life candidate, but I am saying, look, if the difference between electing a Democrat and a Republican in a certain district is saying that you're not in favor of abolishing all private insurance, but rather you believe in a public option, that's probably like a reasonable trade-off. Like I'd rather somebody like that get elected than somebody who's a Republican, obviously, right? And so, you know, that's the trade-off that we have to keep in mind.
Yeah.